At the edge of dawn, the mountains breathe. A pale blue light spills gently across the horizon, brushing against peaks that rise like ancient sentinels above the world. Shadows stretch long across valleys carved by ice and time, while a thin veil of mist drifts silently over forests below. The air is cold, sharp, and impossibly pure, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and distant snow. This is Banff National Park, a place where nature reveals its quiet grandeur, untouched and eternal. Here, water glows. Lakes shimmer in hues of turquoise so vivid they seem unreal, their colors born from glacial dust suspended in meltwater. The surface of Lake Louise lies still as glass, reflecting mountains that pierce the sky, while hidden streams weave through valleys, whispering stories of distant ice fields. Above it all, the peaks stand motionless, yet they are anything but still. These mountains were forged in violence, shaped by forces deep within the earth. Glaciers once flowed like rivers across their slopes, carving valleys and leaving behind the dramatic landscape we see today. Even now, high above, ice clings to rock, shifting slowly, almost imperceptibly, as it continues its ancient work. In the forests below, life moves in quiet harmony. An elk steps cautiously into a meadow. A raven circles overhead. Somewhere unseen, a river rushes over stone, its voice echoing through the wilderness. There is movement everywhere, but it is subtle, woven into the rhythm of the land itself. Time feels different here. It stretches, deepens, and softens. And in that stillness, Banff reveals something rare. A world not shaped by human hands, but by the enduring dialogue between ice, stone, water, and life. The landscape of Banff National Park is a masterpiece written over hundreds of millions of years. A story etched into stone, shaped by oceans, uplifted by tectonic force, and sculpted by ice. Long before mountains rose, this region lay beneath an ancient inland sea. Over 500 million years ago, layers of sediment settled quietly on the ocean floor. Sand, mud, and the remains of marine organisms accumulated slowly, compressing over time into limestone, shale, and sandstone. These layers would later become the very foundation of the Canadian Rockies, a reminder that the towering peaks of today were once part of a submerged world. The transformation began around 80 million years ago during a period known as the Laramide orogeny. Immense tectonic forces pushed the Earth's crust upward and eastward, folding and fracturing the ancient seabed. Unlike volcanic mountain ranges formed by rising magma, the Rockies were created through compression. Massive slabs of rock thrust over one another, creating steep, jagged peaks. This process gave Banff its dramatic topography. Mountains here do not rise gently. They erupt from the land with sudden intensity, sharp ridges, vertical cliffs, and towering summits that dominate the skyline. Peaks like Cascade Mountain and Mount Rundle stand as iconic examples, their layered rock faces revealing the geological history within them. But the mountains alone do not define Banff. It was ice that shaped the valleys between them. During the last ice age, vast glaciers covered much of the region, flowing slowly across the landscape like frozen rivers. As they moved, they carved deep valleys, widened river basins, and smoothed the rugged terrain left behind by tectonic uplift. These glaciers created the distinctive U-shaped valleys seen throughout the park, broad, flat-bottomed landscapes flanked by steep mountain walls. As the ice retreated, it left behind moraines, ridges of rock and debris, and depressions that would later fill with water, forming the park's iconic lakes. The influence of glaciers is still visible today. High above the valleys, remnants of these ancient ice sheets remain. The Columbia Icefield, one of the largest ice fields in North America, continues to feed glaciers that slowly descend into the valleys below. Though much smaller than in the past, these glaciers are still active, shaping the land in subtle but powerful ways. Rivers, too, play a critical role in the park's geography. Fed by glacial meltwater and seasonal snowmelt, they carve through rock, deepen valleys, and transport sediment across vast distances. Over time, these rivers have created canyons, floodplains, and intricate networks of waterways that sustain ecosystems throughout the region. Elevation adds another layer of complexity to Banff's geography. The park spans a wide range of altitudes, from valley floors to towering peaks exceeding 3,000 meters. This variation creates distinct environmental zones, each with its own climate, vegetation, and wildlife. It also contributes to the park's dramatic visual contrasts: lush forests below, barren alpine landscapes above, and snow-capped peaks that remain frozen year-round. And yet, despite its ancient origins, Banff is not a static landscape. Rockfalls continue to reshape mountain faces, glaciers retreat and advance, rivers carve new paths. The forces that created this place are still at work, though often beyond the scale of human perception. Banff is, in essence, a living geological story, a place where the past is written in every cliff and valley, and where the earth continues, quietly and persistently, to shape its own masterpiece. In Banff National Park, climate is not just a background condition. It is the architect of life itself, shaping every valley, forest, and alpine ridge. Winter arrives early, often in quiet, drifting snowfall that blankets the landscape in white. Temperatures plunge well below freezing, and for months, the park exists in a world of ice and silence. Snow gathers deep in the valleys and even deeper along the mountain slopes, insulating the ground beneath while transforming the terrain into a vast frozen expanse. Yet beneath this stillness, life adapts. Seeds lie dormant, animals conserve energy, and entire ecosystems slow to a near pause. Then, almost suddenly, spring awakens the mountains. As sunlight strengthens, snow begins to melt, feeding streams and rivers that swell with renewed energy. The transition is brief but dramatic. Valleys once buried in snow emerge in shades of green, and alpine meadows burst into color. Wildflowers, delicate yet resilient, bloom rapidly, their life cycles compressed into a matter of weeks. Summer in Banff is a season of abundance, though it never fully escapes the influence of altitude. Days are long and bright, but even in July, cool air lingers, especially in higher elevations. Forests hum with activity, and wildlife takes advantage of the short window of warmth to feed, grow, and prepare for the coming winter. Autumn, however, may be the most poetic of all. The air sharpens, and the landscape shifts into tones of gold and amber. Larch trees, unlike most conifers, shed their needles after turning a brilliant yellow, creating glowing forests that contrast against dark evergreen stands. The calls of elk echo through the valleys during mating season, a haunting reminder of nature's rhythms continuing undisturbed. This cycle of seasons is intensified by elevation, creating distinct ecological zones. In the montane zone, found at lower elevations, the climate is relatively mild, supporting open forests and grasslands. Above this lies the subalpine zone, where dense forests of spruce and fir dominate, adapted to colder temperatures and heavier snowfall. Higher still is the alpine zone, a harsh, windswept environment where trees can no longer survive. Here, only low-growing plants, mosses, and lichens endure, clinging to life in thin soils and extreme conditions. Each of these zones hosts its own unique web of life, intricately tied to temperature, moisture, and altitude. In Banff, climate is not merely something that changes, it is something that defines. Water in Banff National Park begins its journey in silence, locked within ancient ice, high above the valleys. Glaciers are among the most powerful forces shaping this landscape. Formed over thousands of years as layers of snow compressed into dense ice, they move slowly under their own immense weight. Though their motion is almost imperceptible, their impact is profound. As they advance and retreat, glaciers carve valleys, grind down rock, and leave behind the raw materials that define the terrain. One of the most significant sources of ice in the region is the Columbia Icefield, a vast expanse that feeds several major glaciers. From these frozen reservoirs, meltwater begins a journey that will extend far beyond the park's boundaries, eventually flowing into rivers that reach distant oceans. As glaciers melt, they release fine particles of rock known as glacial flour. Suspended in water, these particles scatter sunlight, giving Banff's lakes their iconic turquoise and emerald hues. It is a color that feels almost otherworldly, most famously seen in Lake Louise and Moraine Lake, where still waters mirror the surrounding peaks with stunning clarity. But these lakes are not isolated features. They are part of a vast and interconnected system of waterways that define the park. Rivers, such as the Bow River, originate from glacial meltwater, flowing through valleys and carving their paths over time. Along their journey, they shape canyons, deposit sediment, and sustain a wide range of ecosystems. Seasonal change plays a crucial role in this system. In spring and early summer, melting snow and ice swell rivers to their peak. Waterfalls roar with intensity, and streams overflow their banks, carrying nutrients across the landscape. By late summer, the flow begins to ease, revealing gravel beds and calmer currents. In winter, many waterways freeze or slow beneath layers of ice, entering a quieter phase. Beyond their physical presence, these water systems are essential to life in Banff. They provide drinking water for wildlife, nourish plant communities, and create habitats for fish and aquatic species. Wetlands, formed by slow-moving water, become rich ecosystems supporting birds, amphibians, and insects. And yet, like the glaciers that feed them, these waters are changing. As temperatures rise, glaciers retreat at an accelerating pace, altering the timing and volume of meltwater. Lakes may shift in color and level, and rivers may experience changes in flow that ripple through entire ecosystems. Still, for now, the waters of Banff continue their ancient rhythm. From ice to stream, from river to lake, they move endlessly through the landscape, binding together every element of this extraordinary place in a continuous, flowing story. Life in Banff National Park is a quiet testament to resilience. In a land defined by long winters, short summers, and dramatic elevation shifts, every plant and animal has adapted to survive within narrow margins of time and temperature. Yet despite these challenges, the park hosts an astonishing diversity of life, woven together in a delicate, ever-changing balance. The forests are the foundation of this living system. At lower elevations, in the montane zone, open stands of lodgepole pine dominate the landscape. These trees are uniquely adapted to fire, with cones that release seeds only when exposed to intense heat, ensuring regeneration after natural wildfires. Alongside them grow trembling aspen and Douglas fir, creating a patchwork of habitats that support a wide variety of species. Moving higher into the subalpine zone, the forest becomes denser and darker. Engelmann spruce and subalpine fir rise tall and narrow, their needle-like leaves conserving water and resisting heavy snowfall. Here, the air cools and the growing season shortens, but life continues to thrive in quiet persistence. Above the tree line lies the alpine zone, a world shaped by extremes. In this windswept environment, trees can no longer survive. Instead, the ground is covered with hardy grasses, mosses, lichens, and small flowering plants. These alpine species grow low to the earth, avoiding the full force of the wind and trapping warmth close to the soil. When summer arrives, even briefly, these meadows burst into color, tiny blooms that transform the stark landscape into something unexpectedly vibrant. Among this vegetation moves a diverse array of wildlife. Herbivores are often the most visible. Elk graze in open meadows, their presence especially striking in autumn when their calls echo through the valleys. Mule deer move quietly through forest edges, while bighorn sheep navigate steep cliffs with remarkable agility. High above, mountain goats cling to rocky ledges, seemingly defying gravity. Predators, though less often seen, play an essential role in maintaining balance. Wolves travel in coordinated packs, shaping the behavior of prey species across large territories. Cougars move alone and unseen, their presence felt more than observed. And in the forests and valleys, both black bears and grizzly bears forage for berries, roots, and fish, preparing for the long winter ahead. Bird life adds another layer to the ecosystem. Golden eagles soar above open landscapes, while smaller birds, such as Clark's nutcrackers and gray jays, move through forests, dispersing seeds and contributing to forest regeneration. Even the smallest creatures, from insects to amphibians, form vital links in the ecological chain. What makes Banff remarkable is not just the presence of these species, but their interconnectedness. Each plant, each animal, each microorganism plays a role in sustaining the whole. A change in one part of the system, whether climate, vegetation, or predator populations, can ripple outward, affecting the entire ecosystem. Here, life is not separate from the land. It is the land, expressed in movement, color, and sound. Long before Banff National Park was defined by borders or named on maps, it was a place of deep meaning, a living landscape known, traveled, and respected by indigenous peoples for thousands of years. This region lies within the traditional territories of several indigenous nations, including the Stoney Nakoda, Blackfoot Confederacy, Katunaxa, and Tsuut'ina. For these communities, the mountains, rivers, and valleys were not wilderness in the modern sense. They were home, rich with stories, knowledge, and spiritual significance. The land was understood not as something to be owned, but as something to be in relationship with. Seasonal movements guided daily life. In warmer months, families traveled through valleys and alpine areas to hunt, gather plants, and trade with neighboring groups. In winter, they moved to more sheltered regions, adapting to the rhythms of the land with a deep understanding passed down through generations. Certain places held particular importance. Hot springs, such as those found near Sulphur Mountain, were considered sacred, places of healing where the physical and spiritual worlds intersected. Mountains were often seen as powerful beings or spiritual entities, and many stories speak of their origins, their transformations, and their role in shaping the world. Knowledge of the environment was precise and deeply rooted. Indigenous communities understood animal behavior, plant uses, and seasonal changes in ways that allowed them to live sustainably within this challenging landscape. This knowledge was not written in books, but carried through oral traditions, stories, songs, and teachings that preserved both practical survival skills and cultural identity. The arrival of European explorers and settlers in the 19th century marked a profound shift. As Banff became a protected national park in 1885, indigenous peoples were largely excluded from lands they had used for generations. Traditional practices were restricted, and access to sacred sites was limited. The creation of the park, while preserving the landscape, came at a cultural cost that is still being acknowledged today. In recent years, there has been a growing effort to recognize and restore indigenous presence within Banff. Collaborative management initiatives, cultural interpretation programs, and the inclusion of indigenous voices in decision-making are helping to reshape the relationship between people and place. Visitors today may encounter storytelling, art, and guided experiences that reflect indigenous perspectives, offering a deeper, more complete understanding of the land. Because Banff is not only a natural landscape, it is also a cultural one, layered with memory, meaning, and identity. And in listening to those who have known it longest, the mountains reveal not just their beauty, but their story. The modern story of Banff National Park begins not with conquest, but with coincidence. In 1883, construction workers building the Canadian Pacific Railway made an unexpected discovery near the base of Sulphur Mountain, natural hot springs rising from deep within the earth. What began as a practical infrastructure project quickly transformed into something far greater: the unveiling of a landscape of extraordinary beauty and geological significance. News of the hot springs spread rapidly, drawing scientists, travelers, and government interest to the region. At a time when Canada was still defining its national identity, the Rocky Mountains offered something powerful: a vision of wilderness vast enough to inspire both awe and preservation. In 1885, the Canadian government took a historic step by designating a small protected reserve around the hot springs. This marked the birth of what would become the country's first national park system. Initially called Rocky Mountains Park, it was created not only to protect the natural springs, but also to regulate access and development in the rapidly growing region. The expansion of the Canadian Pacific Railway played a crucial role in shaping Banff's early identity. The railway made the mountains accessible to travelers from across North America and Europe. Engineers and entrepreneurs recognized the potential for tourism, and soon grand railway hotels were constructed to accommodate visitors seeking the experience of wilderness without complete isolation. Among them, the Banff Springs Hotel became an iconic symbol of early mountain tourism. As access increased, so did the park's boundaries. Over time, the protected area expanded far beyond the original hot springs site, eventually evolving into what is now Banff National Park as we know it today. Its purpose also broadened, from protecting a single geological feature to conserving entire ecosystems and landscapes. However, this transformation was not without complexity. The creation of the park involved the displacement and restriction of indigenous communities who had lived and traveled through these lands for generations. Their historical presence was largely excluded from early narratives of the park, a legacy that continues to be addressed through modern reconciliation efforts. Despite these challenges, Banff became a global symbol of protected wilderness. It represented a new idea: that landscapes of immense natural value could be preserved not only for economic use, but for beauty, science, and future generations. Today, the park stands as both a triumph of conservation and a reminder of the evolving relationship between people and land. Today, Banff National Park is one of the most visited protected areas in the world, a place where wilderness and accessibility exist in careful balance. Each year, millions of visitors arrive from across the globe, drawn by the park's iconic landscapes: turquoise lakes, glacier-fed rivers, towering limestone peaks, and vast alpine valleys. The experience of Banff is not confined to observation. It is immersive. It invites people to step into the environment, to move through it, and to feel its scale firsthand. The town of Banff serves as the central gateway to the park. Nestled within the mountains, it offers accommodation, restaurants, and cultural spaces while maintaining immediate proximity to wilderness. From here, visitors disperse into all directions, toward hiking trails, ski resorts, viewpoints, and hidden valleys that reveal the park's diversity. Outdoor recreation is at the heart of Banff's identity. In summer, hikers traverse trails that climb from dense forests into alpine meadows where wildflowers bloom against a backdrop of snow-capped peaks. Canoes glide across lakes like Lake Louise and Moraine Lake, their surfaces reflecting the surrounding mountains like mirrors of stone and sky. Climbers scale vertical rock faces, while cyclists and runners follow winding mountain roads. When winter arrives, the landscape transforms completely. Snow blankets the valleys, and the park becomes a world of ice and stillness. Ski resorts, such as those near Lake Louise and Sunshine Village, attract winter sports enthusiasts, while ice climbers ascend frozen waterfalls that glisten like crystal sculptures. Even simple activities, walking through snow-covered forests or standing beside a frozen lake, become experiences of quiet intensity. Yet behind this vibrant tourism industry lies a constant responsibility. Managing human impact is essential to preserving the park's ecological integrity. Infrastructure must be carefully designed, wildlife corridors maintained, and visitor behavior guided toward sustainability. Education plays a key role, encouraging respect for wildlife and awareness of fragile ecosystems. Banff's challenge is delicate but clear: to remain accessible without becoming overwhelmed, and to share its beauty without diminishing it. In this balance, the park continues to evolve, offering not only recreation, but also reflection on how humans and nature can coexist within the same landscape. Even within the protected boundaries of Banff National Park, the forces of change are constant and unavoidable. Perhaps the most visible challenge is climate change. Rising temperatures are accelerating the retreat of glaciers across the Canadian Rockies, including those feeding the park's rivers and lakes. As these ancient ice reserves diminish, the timing and volume of meltwater shifts, altering river systems that countless species depend upon. Lakes may fluctuate in depth and clarity, and seasonal water flows become less predictable. Wildlife also feels the pressure of a warming climate. Species adapted to cold, high-altitude environments are gradually forced to shift their ranges upward, reducing available habitat. At the same time, changing vegetation patterns influence food sources and migration routes, subtly reshaping the balance of the ecosystem. Human activity adds another layer of complexity. As one of the world's most visited national parks, Banff faces significant visitor pressure. Roads, trails, and infrastructure fragment habitats, while increased foot traffic can disturb sensitive environments. Wildlife vehicle collisions remain a concern, especially for large mammals such as elk and bears. In response, conservation efforts have become increasingly sophisticated. Wildlife corridors and overpasses have been constructed to allow safe animal movement across highways. Park management uses monitoring programs, satellite data, and field research to track ecological changes in real time. Strict regulations guide development and tourism, aiming to balance access with preservation. Education is also central to conservation. Visitors are encouraged to respect wildlife distance, follow designated trails, and understand the fragile systems they are entering. The goal is not to stop change, but to guide it, to ensure that the rhythms of this landscape continue, even as the world around it transforms. In the end, Banff National Park is not defined by any single image, neither its turquoise lakes, nor its towering peaks, nor its vast forests. It is defined by something quieter, a presence, a silence that is not empty, but full, of wind moving through pine branches, of rivers carving stone, of glaciers slowly shaping the earth in ways too patient for human time. To stand within Banff is to feel the scale of something far older than memory. It is to recognize that beauty here is not static, but living, continuously formed by ice, water, stone, and life in delicate balance. And as the light fades behind the mountains, the landscape does not disappear. It simply waits, enduring.